I think there's something to the fact that Hollywood has really contributed to the stigmatization of abortion and a lot of public perception that abortion is not normal when, in fact, we know it's very common, or the public perception that abortion causes medical problems when we also know that's not the case. So I think, obviously Hollywood isn't responsible, but I think it's helped contribute to a lot of the public misperceptions that there are about abortion.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luse, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. Since the 1970s, abortion in America has appeared in countless television shows and films. But how it's portrayed, sometimes as a dangerous decision, sometimes as a medical necessity, has shifted along with the politics of the time. Some storylines dealt in reality, while others dramatized it beyond recognition. To understand how Hollywood has depicted abortion throughout the years, we're chatting with Janet Goldwater, director of the documentary Hollywood Does Abortion, and Steph Herold, researcher at Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health. Janet, Steph, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Thanks for having us.
I'm really excited to be here, Brittany.
So happy to have you both. Okay, to start off, what was the first abortion storyline that you ever saw on screen? Janet, we can start with you.
So it turns out that the first abortion storyline that I saw was Dirty Dancing. And I have to admit that years later, when I watched it for the second time, was when it sunk into me that abortion was central to this story, because at the time that I watched Dirty Dancing, when it first came out, I was totally fixated on, the dance, the dancing, and so it was really later. I had an abortion. I started becoming an abortion activist, and and then I realized, wow, that movie, was there in my consciousness.
And what about you, Steph?
I always think about it as Dirty Dancing, but I think that's not true. I think for me, it was actually Sex and the City was on while I was in high school. And I kind of snuck around to watch it. And I think it was Miranda's Not Abortion. That was my first kind of exposure to abortion on TV. It seemed, I always identified with her, super feminist, very ambitious. And then to see her not have an abortion was a click moment for me, where I was like, what's going on here? That doesn't make sense for this show that
for the
talks
character
about
either.
The character, right. And the show talks about everything else, so bluntly. I think that was really the moment for me.
Interesting. I think for me, it was Manny Santos, this character on Degrassi, The Next Generation.
Yes.
This is actually a Canadian teen soap. And Manny was this Filipina-Canadian character. She was 14 years old. And she got pregnant and then by some guy that she was, dating or hanging out with or whatever. And she decided to get an abortion with the support of her mom. She felt like having a kid was just not going to work for her plans for the future. And so she decided to do it. Her mom supported her. I want to talk about your documentary, Hollywood Does Abortion. It's an exploration of Hollywood's fraught relationship to the truth when it comes to depicting abortion, which makes me wonder, what was the first abortion storyline that made you go, wait, what? Because it was so inaccurate.
Yeah. So in Hollywood Does Abortion, we start the movie with an episode of Maude that was aired in 1972. And in this, a grandmother discovers, right on the verge of menopause, discovers that she's pregnant. And, and no surprise, she and her husband have a good talk and, decide that, no, this is not a good time to have a baby 20 years after, So there's this very normal, sort of abortion. And then we fast forward to the movie that, that I remember being shocked by, which was Juno, a couple decades later.
Yeah, it's 2007, 2008.
Where, abortion's now been legal for quite a while, and it's very normalized. And then Juno, this funny, hip, suburban teenager, goes, gets pregnant with, from, a slightly random hookup, nice guy. And she decides not to have the abortion because somebody tells her the baby has fingernails. And so that was like the shocking moment. This was a very smart team of writers and directors that were making this movie. It was a wonderful movie. And yet we know intuitively, I think, that, that teenager, wouldn't just decide on a whim that it would be fun to have a baby.
Yeah. And also like relinquish it for adoption, like in a very casual way that the film sort of handles. I understand narratively what they were going for. But that's a really good point. What about you, Steph? What was like the first abortion storyline that you saw that you were like, hold on, this is not lining up with real life?
Yes, I think kind of similarly for me, it was Knocked Up. And watching that movie and watching the Katherine Heigl character really settle for this Seth Rogen kind of like, I think I say in the documentary, this kind of like schmuck, and I stand by that. I feel like she can do better. Like we all know she can do better.
I mean, the film agrees, I think, for most of the movie that she can do better. Yeah.
Yes, and I think the way that the movie talks about abortion, or that's the movie where they have this like shmush-mortion joke. Like the joke is that they can't even say the word abortion, right? But that the baby becomes kind of the redemptive arc for the Seth Rogen character. It just felt to me like all of a sudden this story that was supposed to be or could have been really about her, and made him the hero in this way, and she was just kind of sacrificed. It just felt so gross. Like I just didn't like it.
I mean, when you sort of bring up these films that are really popular and really well regarded, that are funny, genuinely funny, but are also kind of like exploring these themes in a way that could feel kind of retrograde, despite the fact that abortion had been legal for a very long time at that point. I know, Janet, you brought up Maude. I love that the film basically starts with that Maude episode from 1972, a year before Roe v. Wade. The conversation, the way that it's talked about feels in some ways more modern and fresher than the way that abortion is discussed often on TV today. I mean, you point out specifically in the film how abortion and how it's depicted on TV is not just a reflection of sort of like, the mores of the time, but also like of power in Hollywood. Like how someone can be able to tell a certain story is a reflection on how much power they have or do not have in that moment. From Norman Lear in the 70s and like 80s to Shonda Rhimes in the 2000s, like to now. I mean, literally I was in high school when Grey's Anatomy came on TV, and I'm almost 40. And Grey's Anatomy is still on TV. They are two creators specifically, basically two, like the king and queen of television, not just for their respective periods, but kind of all time. They both push for these topics to be discussed, but in different ways. Like, I wonder, what do their differing approaches say to you about like power, but also like our changing attitudes about abortion over the years?
Well, you brought up Shonda Rhimes, and I think she's just as you say, she's the queen. She's the current reigning queen of television. A great example that we use in the movie is how when she was still doing network TV and she pushed for an abortion plotline with Christina. She plans to get an abortion. She just wants to be a surgeon. She doesn't want to have children, and the network forces Shonda Rhimes to have her have a miscarriage, so she doesn't actually have and that is not us speculating. That's what everybody who worked on the show said, was that she wanted to do an abortion, and they were like, no, she can. And this is what's so interesting, is how power works, that they, it's like, it's okay to be in favor of abortion, but it's not actually okay to have one.
Like, depict it.
And that was sort of what was happening in politics at the time. You had candidates, running for president saying, these are the Democratic candidates saying, approve of abortion, but I'm personally against it, and no one in my family would ever have one. So you sort of have this double standard and it plays out. Shonda Rhimes then has enough power that when she, amasses all these shows and goes to streaming, then, the same character still wants to just be a surgeon, and she gets pregnant again and she actually goes through with her abortion.
And yet Shonda Rhimes had to be exceptional in the world of television history to be able to depict something like that on TV. And I say this as a person, I mean, I'm not on my moral soapbox, okay? I'm not a moral paragon over here of what people should and should not be watching on television. I watch Love Island every day. But I don't know, it just seems so weird that a very common medical procedure that many people have, that is somehow more salacious than any of the sort of violence. Even like I said, I watch a lot of trashy TV, but I can't even watch a show like Cold Case where they're we're showing a few too many cold, dead women's bodies that are barely dressed for my taste. But that was something that happened on television every single week. You can watch people getting sexually assaulted, stories that depict sexual assault, domestic violence, murder, all those sorts of things can come on TV all of the time. And yet this medical procedure that's really common, that's salacious. And that's something that, as we're discussing, you have to amass a certain level of power like a Norman Lear or a Shonda Rhimes in order to sort of influence what we can see. That's pretty deep. What do you think about all this stuff?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that it's actually a bigger structural problem, which is what you were hinting at. I think that there are a lot of writers who want to tell these amazing, unique, different, interesting stories about abortion, and have written lots of amazing screenplays or TV episodes, TV series, but face a lot of pushback from networks or from executives because there's an assumption that audiences don't want to watch shows about abortion or won't love a character when they have an abortion. And we know that that's just not true. From research that we've done that shows that audiences actually because they have these personal experiences, they've had abortions themselves, they know people who've had abortions.
Yeah.
They want to see that reflected on screen. They want to see the complex gender, work, power, sex dynamic that makes for such good television, and that includes abortion. It's just part of life. But I think networks can be really afraid of pushback, and afraid of being boycotted or of being called out, or that people just won't tune in. So I think it's hard to counter a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, you point out in the film, and this is just true in general of what you can see on television versus what you could see in a movie. At the end of the day, television shows, especially traditional sort of primetime sitcoms or dramas, they have these sponsors that are showing up throughout the show to sell their products. They want to be able to have more freedom creatively, but it's oh, well, Crest toothpaste or Tide laundry detergent doesn't want to be associated with, I don't know, a discussion of whatever. I'm glad you brought up Shonda Rhimes and specifically Scandal and showing an abortion on Scandal. And even showing Olivia Pope, the main character, laying on a table, in an operating room, not actually going into the room with her. She was one of the first Black women to have an abortion on screen. She's the lead character in Scandal, Olivia Pope. Olivia Pope, as in Olivia Pope, the lead character from Scandal. Scandal, which started airing in 2012. This episode came out in 2015. I mean, it's just wild to me. I watched Manny Santos get an abortion when she was 14, when I was also a teenager in the 2000s on Canadian TV. And in hindsight, I'm yeah, it probably was notable on some level that for me, maybe even subliminally that this character was not white. But I really didn't realize it had taken that long.
I think in terms of the other kinds of things that have been missing from TV. I mean, not seeing a blackface, going into an abortion clinic until that late, and then to boot, she's aborting a pregnancy with the president. That she conceived with the president.
So Shonda Rhimes does one thing. She knows drama, baby.
Yeah,
she knows drama.
Yeah. But why did that take so long? And why did it? The other things that we don't see are the. We know that the majority of people in our country, for lots of systemic reasons that have abortions, are people of color. So that we're not, we're clearly not seeing that represented. We know that most people that choose to end a pregnancy already have kids.
Yeah.
And that's something that got left out of mainstream film and TV for a long time. It wasn't until quite recently that Crazy Ex-Girlfriend decided that it wouldn't be the main character, the Rachel Bloom character, who has the abortion, but her older friend, Paula, who already has a teenage son. And she's just about to go to law school.
Well, I think I would jump in to say that, Olivia Pope is the first Black character that we see actually have her abortion on screen. There were Black characters before that who had abortions. We just didn't actually see it. Yeah, we didn't actually see it happen. Right. So like in the 80s, there was this show 21 Jump Street. Like it's often a past abortion that comes up. Right. It's not, but we don't get to see, the way that we do with Olivia Pope, where, like you said, right, she's at the clinic. We see the provider.
Well, it's explicit. It's like it's saying the quiet thing or the totally unsaid thing, like loud. Yeah.
Yes. And at the same time, right, Olivia never really talks about the abortion again. So I love that, Shonda Rhimes was so, explicit in making sure that abortion was portrayed in the way that it was. And she said in interviews that even though she was so successful at that point, she really had to push the network to let her do that. At the same time, we almost never hear Olivia talk about the abortion again.
That is very different than how abortion is often treated on TV, or even the question of abortion is often treated on TV, even still, like as recently as a couple of years ago on a show like And Just Like That. There was a character, I believe her name is Lisa, who gets pregnant like in her late 40s. And like, to your point, she is a woman who is married. She already has children. There's a whole question, the whole episode or a couple of episodes where she's like, oh, what should I do? Should I have the baby? Should I not? Should I have it? What should I do? And I don't even know if I can't even remember whether or not she even questions having an abortion. I just remember she seems really overwhelmed by this question.
Oh, her husband brings it up. Her husband says, he's like, should we talk? He won't say the word abortion, but he says, should we talk about the other option, the obvious option? And she's like, oh, no. I'm glad that choice
right. It's
exists,
like she wouldn't even
but
consider
no way.
It. Which I'm like, okay, I live in New York. I'm like in my late 30s. If I think about, someone I know who's like that, who's in their late 40s, great career, like cooking with gas, got 2 kids. I just don't think that a woman like that or her husband would be afraid of your husband, also someone that you already have been in a relationship with for a very long time, already have 2 other children, assuming you've seen each other through tons of other ups and downs. The fact that you can't even say the word abortion to each other on a Sex and the City spinoff, right? And then she ends up miscarrying. There's this, the magical miscarriage trope that you discuss in the film.
I related to that character so much because she had actually, one of the reasons she was upset about being pregnant was that she had just received a huge amount of funding to make a documentary. And I was like, oh my God, you got the money. It's like so hard to get money to make documentaries.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so it just felt like it felt like something that wasn't true to the character. It felt like it wasn't true to the show. It felt like actually like we were turning back the clock from even the discussion they had on Sex and the City 20, 25, 30 years before with Miranda's character. What's interesting though is that like that is so not like in line with the actual statistics that you share in the film. Something like only 6% of women or people who intend to get an abortion don't do it. And if you watch TV, it feels like it's a lot more people. Like it just, I don't know. It's totally out of like the way that abortion is depicted, or how people, whether or not they decide to, because of the magical miscarriage trope, whether or not they have complications. Another trope that you all pointed out in the film is like, there are the percentage of depictions of abortions on screen that result in complications, 37.5%. But in real life, only 2.1% of people who get abortions experience complications from them. That's a huge disparity. And sometimes you'll see people on TV who die from having abortions, legal abortions. When in actuality, childbirth is 14 times more likely to result in death than legal abortion, according to your film and your research. Why do you think there is this huge disparity between negative outcomes we see on screen from abortion and the negative outcomes we see in real life from abortion?
Yeah, I think it's really complicated, and I think a lot of it has to do with who has power in Hollywood and who has the power to shape these stories. And I think, we've started to see a lot more depictions of abortion on screen in the last decade or so, because we've had more women, more people of color in the writers' rooms, in the executive chairs, being able to greenlight these kinds of shows. And I think in the past, we didn't have that. So really, you had kind of these wealthy white men shaping what we saw on TV. At the same time, there are still a lot of wealthy white men at the top. I'm thinking like of Margot's Got Money Troubles, right? It's like a recent show, and there's another show, Rooster, that I just started watching with Steve Carell.
Oh, yeah. There was another show that I watched. It was a British show. Alice and Steve. I've seen I've seen everything that you're talking about. And it is the exact same thing. There's like a smart young woman who is like in college or about to like finishing a PhD or something. Like in a really crucial point in her life, and then gets pregnant by not just get pregnant by someone who like maybe they really like, or they're in a relationship with, or they have some sort of like deep tie to. Like they get pregnant by like a person who is completely wrong for them, who they do not maybe even want to remain in a relationship with. Like these are all young women living in the 2020s. It's very weird.
Yes, and also the show Dr. Odyssey, that was really popular. That has a similar character who's just about to go to medical school and she gets pregnant. And for her, that character, she like doesn't know who the father is. Both of them are committed to supporting her. She decides to carry the pregnancy to term, and and then what do you know? It turns out she's not pregnant after all. And then in these other shows, right, just like you said, these really smart, competent women kind of about to embark on their lives all of a sudden kind of decide without there isn't a lot of space given to talking about abortion, but somehow they know that the quote unquote right decision is to have the abortion. And you have the kind of like callous characters around them being like, what do you mean? You should have had the abortion. And it reminds me of so much of Knocked Up, where that you have like the only character who talks about abortion in this kind of direct way is Katherine Heigl's. I don't remember if it's her mom or her stepmom.
I think it might have been her mom. Maybe.
Yes, who says like, your sister just took care of it. You should do that too. And it comes across
like some other character took care of it, or stepsister, whoever took care of it.
Maybe stepsister.
And now she's got a real baby. Like she says it in this callous way that's like,
yeah, right. No, that's not right. And like, of course, we want to see depictions of people who make the right pregnancy decision for themselves, right? It's not like we don't want anybody to have babies on TV, but when you start to see abortion being depicted as the wrong choice, or not even a choice, over and over and over and over again, you have to stop to wonder, like, something's going on here. Like, why is it that none of these characters are even considering abortion in a serious way?
Still, watching your film had made me realize that I had absorbed a lot of inaccurate messaging about abortion, through, all these different movies and TV shows that I loved. And some of them I still love. I would have thought many more people have experiences where they go into abortion clinics and, walk out. Because that is something that we've seen on television so much. Like even myself, who was raised with a lot of factual information, and with the attitude that this is something that's a healthcare option, I still was absorbing a lot of this messaging. I wonder, like, what makes these stories so powerful and in some ways even stickier than facts?
I was just thinking about this recent study that my team did where we asked a small group of people who've had abortions to watch a couple of different abortion plot lines and tell us their thoughts about them. And what really stood out to me was that, no one commented on the demographic accuracy or the medical accuracy. What they cared the most about was the emotional resonance of the shows. And that shouldn't have surprised me, but I think because I've focused for so much of my career on these kind of moments of accuracy or inaccuracy, but hearing people say, like, it was so powerful to see the mom support her daughter through an abortion. I wish I'd had that during my abortion. Or it was so powerful to see, the boyfriend support his girlfriend, go into the clinic with her and reading a book about medication abortion before she has it.
Oh,
like,
and like the episode of Station 19 that you all discussed in the film.
Yeah. Yes. Like people really appreciated seeing those things, and it made them feel good about their own past abortions. So I think there's this what I love about on-screen representation is that it can show people what's possible, not just what is. So I think that's important to think about too, right? It's not just the accuracy or inaccuracy, although it's obviously, important to say, like, yes, Law and Order, you should not be showing people bleeding out on the street after taking abortion pills. Like that's not good. We don't want that. We don't want that. At the same time, like Janet was saying, we don't need you to have a checklist of all, the exact statistics to show. You don't need to create this perfect amalgamation of an abortion patient or provider. But it would be lovely to see people really supported during their abortions, and find ways to make that really good TV. It doesn't have to be boring TV. It can be very compelling.
Well, I think about I think the first season of The Pit on HBO. There was a teen girl who was seeking an abortion. Like I think her aunt was bringing her, and then it was a drama because the mom shows up at the hospital, and also like one of the doctors sort of fudged where she, like how far along she was, so that she could be able to obtain a medication abortion at that hospital. And like I think at least for me, the like all those sort of plot points are helpful sort of scaffolding, but for me with that whole storyline, I was really affected by this young woman talking about how this is the choice that she wanted to make with her body. Like to your point, that was the thing that I really responded to, was seeing her, like, I guess through the eyes of an adult, because I haven't watched that episode of Degrassi in a million years, right? But seeing through the eyes of an adult, like, oh, this is what it looks like for a young woman to have agency, and using it in a doctor's office. That is something that there are times in doctor's offices where I wish that I would have exerted more agency. And seeing someone so young do that, those things are still extremely powerful. I guess, there's still, regardless of, I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, the emotional resonance of these kinds of representation. It's powerful, I think, even if it doesn't necessarily directly relate to your exact lived experience. I want to kind of turn toward the real world out here. I wonder, how do you think Hollywood's handling of abortion contributed to getting us to the point that we're at right now with reproductive rights in America? Because right now, right, as we're talking, we just passed the 4-year mark since the overturn of Roe v. Wade, which is something, like I said, it was the law of the land before I was born. And I hadn't really, for most of my young life, imagined a future where that wouldn't be the case. And yet it is the case now, and it has been so for 4 years. I wonder, how do you think Hollywood's depiction of abortion contributed, possibly, if it did, to getting us to that moment?
Yeah, I think it certainly contributed. I mean, it's absolutely not the only factor. The power that the right has really been able to capitalize on and maintain, over the how much they used Roe as kind of an organizing tactic for 40 years. But I think there's something to the fact that Hollywood has really contributed to the stigmatization of abortion, and a lot of public perception that abortion is not normal when, in fact, we know it's very common, or the public perception that abortion causes medical problems when we also know that's not the case. The public perception that abortion and religion are diametrically opposed to each other. We know that most abortion patients have some kind of religious affiliation, right? And that they feel very supported by that in making their decision to have an abortion. That Hollywood has really helped separate abortion from parenting, right? That there's helped create this myth that there are mothers and then that there are people who have abortions, when we know that the majority of people who have abortions are raising kids. So I think, obviously Hollywood isn't responsible, but I think it's helped contribute to a lot of the public misperceptions that there are about abortion.
And I think you could also say that they've contributed by their lack of pushback. Hollywood and creators have somehow perpetuated this sort of fear that this is a divisive issue and we don't want to alienate our viewers by, upsetting them about this divisive issue. When in fact it's only divisive because we keep being told that it's divisive.
I wonder, as we sort of turn toward the future, what might a way forward look like in terms of how abortion is depicted on television and in films?
I think that there's the wishful and then the realistic. So it depends on
Share them both. Share them both.
There are a couple of writers in the documentary, especially thinking of Merritt Tierce, who talks about, she's written this abortion office comedy. I'm dying to see, the work comedy around an abortion clinic, especially as someone who's worked in a clinic and who knows, the hijinks that can ensue. I would love to see, more depictions of characters self-managing their abortion. So, being able to order abortion pills online, have a slumber party with their friends who they're there to support them having an abortion. Really to see how abortion happens in real life today, portrayed on screen. To see people or characters who are really dealing with the colossal barriers to care that people experience now. It's not just having to drive one state away, but having to drive across the country, having to figure out, how are you going to pay thousands of dollars for the abortion? We still don't see a lot of that on TV. I think TV really contributes to this misperception that once you want an abortion, that the hardest thing is making the decision. When in reality, the easiest part is often making the decision. The hard part is actually getting the abortion, getting to the clinic, getting the money together. So I would love to see more of that so audiences get a sense of how challenging the abortion access landscape is. But I don't know and if there's any chance that, our supposedly liberal Hollywood will actually take up that challenge and responsibility.
What do you think, Janet? What do you think the way forward looks like?
I think it's really important that drama includes as she mentioned, the drama of overcoming these barriers. And for me, the gold standard so far has been the Grey's Anatomy show, which came out right after Dobbs. I mean, they just hit the ground running as soon as the Supreme Court dismantled abortion. And they did a show called When I Get to the Border, which showed the damage that, doctors in a state where someone with an ectopic pregnancy couldn't get a procedure, had to be shipped to another state, and she dies at the border of that state. Wow. And that show was watched by in real time by 3 million people. So I mean, that's a national discussion that you're showing immediately the results of the Supreme Court decision. And I think we need to keep reminding people that there's real life consequences to these big policy decisions, and that you see a more accurate representation of the demographics. You see more people of color. You see more people who are parents. You're seeing there is the desire, the appetite by creators to make these shows. And we just have to hope that doesn't get shut down by the sort of consolidation of media that we're seeing.
I have really enjoyed this conversation. I learned so much from your film. Steph, Janet, thank you both so much.
Thanks for having us, Brittany. It's great chatting with you.
Thank you very much, Brittany.
That was Janet Goldwater, director of the documentary Hollywood Does Abortion, and Steph Herold, researcher at Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health. And to all of you watching, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Be sure to come back to this feed every Tuesday for a fresh video episode. You can watch these episodes exclusively on Spotify, YouTube, and the NPR app.